essentially, I live in Bombay, or, for me, it's always Bombay, but, I should say Mumbai. For the last 20 years, I've lived in IIT Bombay campus. And pretty much everything that I'm going to share in my today's presentation is basically from my own experience of working with students, with corporates, with faculty. Most of my career has been in the education domain, right? I've had to engage with corporates because of my work. And I've probably mentored thousands of students at the Maker Bhavan Foundation. We work with almost 15 colleges across India. 5 of them are IITs, 2 are BITS campuses, and so on and so forth. So, I do interact with students a lot, even alumni. And this is based on my observations and from my interactions with students. And also because, everything that I talk about is what I've taught myself. I'm self-taught. Some of the skill sets that I talk about, I've taught myself at a time when, these terms and lingos were not even in prevalence, right? So the message here is for everybody here is that if you're interested, you can teach yourself many things. And that's one of the hallmarks of a lifelong learner, which is one of the key skills that I'm going to talk about today. Now, let's go to the next slide. So in this, I want to focus on, that we, those students and young alums who've just joined the workforce, a major focus for them is, of course, for obvious reasons, their careers, and they sort of research and talk about what is the future of work going to be. My first message is the future of work is already here, right? You think about the 4th industrial revolution, the fact that, we live in a world that is entirely technology driven. And thanks to the pandemic, and the increasing automation of work, it has created a double disruption, right, in the workforce and in the future labor market. The gap, if you see the screen, I have sort of highlighted the number of jobs that will disappear globally and the number of new roles that may emerge. The data is drawn from the World Economics Forum's Future of Work. You guys can look it up. It's a very interesting and illuminating read. And if you notice, the gap between the jobs that will disappear and the jobs that may appear has narrowed, right? And this narrowing of the gap means that the in-demand skills will change very rapidly in the next 5 years. Back in 2018, reskilling and upskilling of employees, most business houses, their requirement was at about 66%. Currently, most businesses expect that 94% of their employees, whether current or future, will reskill or upskill themselves, right? That's a very high percentage. And which means that, whatever you graduated with at your school, in your undergraduate or postgraduate degree, is very soon going to be, and especially if it's a tech job, the turnover rate is so high that, it probably will be obsolete and not very much in demand in the course of next 5 to 10 years. So what do you do, right? Your core job skills is what is going to get hired. But what will make you excel at the jobs that you have and make sure that you're not fired is actually these 21st century skill sets. So can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So, in the previous decade when I was a student, right, what was talked about, especially in business schools, is soft skills, right? Now, I find soft skills and hard skills to be a not very precise way of describing what these skills are. Soft skills are essentially cognitive skills. And these cognitive skills, some are still relevant from the previous century. For example, you still need to have very good teamwork skills. You still need to be very good at communication. Actually, communication will remain relevant always, right? That's bread and butter. But some of these cognitive skills have changed and will continue to be more relevant and what are these skills that will continue to be more relevant in the next 5 or 10 years? Are essentially creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, and of course, communication. I also want people to pay attention to what is called low priority skills, because most students in engineering schools spend a lot of time learning how to code. And I want them to see that engineering and coding by themselves, right, is only at 8%. And the source is from LinkedIn's 2020 Workplace Learning Report. So this is not something that I pulled out of my hat. Now, when I say engineering and coding, it's not an absolute in itself. For example, Python coding is very much in demand, right? Within engineering, one area that is going to really explode is 3D printing and 4D printing skills. So in core tech, you cannot survive unless and until you have actual hands-on skills in 3D printing, laser cutting, 4D printing, right? Those are the new domains that are opening up. And from our own work at the foundation, I've noticed that most engineering work stops at simulation, right? People do designs in AutoCAD and that's where it stops. That's not going to be enough, right? The fact is that these are real skills that will be needed more and more in the future, right? Can you go to the, so in this, I want to pause here and I want to run a small poll, right? I want to get a sense of what is the interest of the students or the young professionals who have joined. And I will explain why I'm running the poll later.
So learners, you can see the question is, what is your key focus area while you pursue your degree? Learning, career, unsure. Any more answers, or should I wait like 30 seconds more?
No, I think we've got it. So you can end.
And so you can see, ma'am, 73%. We have got the answer as career.
Yeah. So, the reason why I did this exercise, and it completely validates what I already know, is that from the time a person enters college, right, to the point that they exit, right, they are focused on the job that they're going to secure, and that's it, right? And they're driven by what I call a FOMO mentality, fear of missing out, right? So, they're constantly doing stuff, right? Whether it is, learning the latest in fashion, thing that everybody is doing. For example, I get to know from students that the design systems algorithms is the new it thing, right, in coding. So, they're always pursuing something because they think that is the one thing that will make them secure the most high-paying job. It's also not easy for students in the current era because it's a highly competitive environment. And the very nature of the whole entrance examination process makes most of the STEM and engineering students highly competitive. So, not just what job do you get, but what salaries do you get is what is the most prevalent and top of the mind for most students. But the funny thing is, and this is what I want to tell all the students, is that what is going to make you secure that job and make you do well is how well-rounded you are as a professional, right? And that means that, you have to expand your horizons. And your 4 years in college is all about learning. Career is going to be there for you irrespective of what you do in these 4 years for the rest of your life, right? This is the one opportunity that you have for making yourself well-rounded, experimenting and trying different things, and then making sure that when you go for that all-important job interview, you present your best self. So how do you make yourself well-rounded, right? Can we go to the next slide? The next one. So well-rounded, no, the one before that. Yeah. So what are these 21st century skill sets that you need to learn, and how do you learn them? In my view, to be a lifelong learner, these are the, what you see in the screen are the attributes of a lifelong learner. If you pick up these skills, is how you will become a well-rounded professional, right? Critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, innovation. Communication usually happens in a collaborative environment, right? Because from the learner to the receiver, right, there is already a connection, right? Unless and until you're able to connect, you're not really communicating, which means you have to be a good communicator, you have to write well, you have to present yourself well orally, and also you have to be a good listener, right? One point that this is my own personal view is having some financial skills, and this is rarely taught in engineering schools, is a must, because as soon as you join, whether you become an entrepreneur, you join a business, or you join a corporate house and become a manager, you're supposed to have some basic financial skills from day one. But unfortunately, nobody teaches you that. At least I wasn't taught, right? And this is my own from EA. I think it is important that you learn some basic finance skills when you're in college. Now, how you do it, if your college offers some soft skills courses and they're offering some EA, do it, or find the EA online, which will give you basic financial skills, because that is going to be very necessary when you join the job. And as I said, that all these things that are on the top are basically skills that are going to be very much in demand in a technology-driven, globalized workplace, right? Some of the other skills that I haven't mentioned, but I think I should mention now, is digital literacy, right? Because, today's work is data-driven, right? Which means that a certain amount of digital literacy is very much needed. The other thing is today's work, most of us, at least a very large portion, increasingly will work from home and will only visit from offices from time to time. They will also be a part of a transnational workforce, which means that your colleague might be located somewhere across the globe. And in that case, having cultural knowledge and being culturally sensitive is very, very important, as is being aware about diversity, whether it is gender or ethnic or whatever, right? These things make a difference. I cannot emphasize this more, right? Now we can go to the next slide. So what is a creative problem solving process? Before we go into this, and this is what I learned, and, this will also tell you how soft skills remain relevant and have a longer shelf life. Way back in 1940, there was somebody called Alex Osborne and Sid Barnes, and they came across this idea called creative problem solving process. And Alex Osborne was also the person who first came up with the term called brainstorming, right? Which we use extensively today, right? And this Alex Osborne Barnes creative learning process was designed in 1940, and it remains relevant even today, which sort of points out to you that these are cognitive skills that remain relevant for a long time. So what does a creative problem solving process help you to do? It sort of first helps you identify what is a problem that you might encounter very quickly. And usually at the workplace, there are open-ended, which means that there is no simple, clear, direct answer, right? It also sort of makes you think critically with yourself and collaboratively with others as to what can be a possible solution, right? And this is necessarily that what this requires, and why I'm saying that it's a collaborative process, is that there's no single perspective that you can assess a problem, but there is a multiplicity of perspectives. So the problems in today's current work scenario tend to be complex. But where it is important is that, once you analyze, and critical thinking helps you to build an argument about your solution and then present it as a solution to others, and then to reach consensus that this is a solution that you're going to pursue as a group, right? Because in today's workplaces, you work in teams, right? You seldom work in isolation. The other two things that I've highlighted in red, which I want everybody to be aware of, is, and one of them I already talked about, that it requires coordinated approach and action. And because, it is in a work environment, so they're rarely in a low stakes problem, right? It's a high stakes problem because the results will define how you're measured and assessed, right? Which is why, having creative problem solving skills is going to be increasingly more and more important.
So the question is, what are the most common obstacles to solving problems? Mindset, cognitive bias, problem solving in the groups. And I end the poll here. Thank you for participating. Yes. So, ma'am, you can see 67% we get the answer as mindset, 8% is cognitive bias, and 25% is problem solving.
See, engineering students are smart. They got the right answer, which is mindset, right? Why mindset? Because, most students who come into STEM schools, colleges, they're very competitive, right? One attribute of being competitive is that you're afraid of failure, right? But, and the other thing is that fear of failure often stops you from experimenting. And if you don't experiment while you're in college, then you will be unable to experiment, right? When you go into the job force. And this is one of the biggest barriers that one needs to break to be an effective problem solver, right? We can go to the next slide. And I'm going to come back to the fear of failure and mindset thing towards the end, right? Because I do want to focus on that at the end as well. I often hear from students that they don't think they're creative, right? They most probably, when you were at school, you were in a drawing class and you drew something and it was bad, and, you thought that, okay, I'm not a creative person, right? But that's not what creativity is. Here, what we are focusing on is technical creativity. And that is different from artistic creativity. I tend to think of, creativity as, if I can use an analogy, it is weight versus height, right? I can't grow 12 inches in 2 weeks or a month or even 3 months. But if I want to change my weight, right, then that is dependent on my behavior, right, and how I conduct myself, right? Creativity is the weight in this scenario. If you want to be creative and if you follow certain rules, then everybody is creative. As a matter of fact, we all make creative choices in our everyday lives. For example, what is program thinking versus lateral thinking, right? You see this box, right? And this became very popular in the context of out of the box thinking, right? And if you had to draw 4 lines, right, straight lines, and connect all these 9 dots, right, the only way you can do it is most people will try to connect within that field, the square field that is created. But only way that you can actually connect the dots is going outside that field, right, of those outer boundaries of 4 lines. That is why this test is usually done to emphasize what is out of the box thinking, which also reinforces that we are, human brains are pattern recognition systems, right? We work in perceiving the world and understanding it based on patterns, just like the one that I'm showing here. But the point is that sometimes you have to go beyond the pattern to actually succeed and understanding the problem, right? Which is why I said that the only way you can connect it is by going outside the box and creating the 4 lines. So how do you change? How do you, and doing pattern recognition is useful for one reason, that is to quickly grasp things. But then patterns also make you creators of habit, right? You're used to thinking of things in a certain way and in a certain way only. How to break out of that is to actually practice lateral thinking. Lateral thinking actually enables you to understand the problem from various perspectives and then finding a creative and brilliant solution for the problem that you're encountering. I don't want to talk more about this because I don't want this to be all about me talking, but look up lateral thinking. And there are many resources on lateral thinking online. There is a site called Mind Tools, which you can access. It also helps you do tests and stuff, which will encourage you to become more of a lateral thinking person. Next slide. This is my favorite part. This is my bread and butter. So, in most engineering schools, 60% of the people who graduate are bad communicators, which is why they refuse to secure good jobs. 40% fail in the first 2 years, again, because of lack of soft skills and communication skills. And, my career over the last 20 years, this has been what has helped me progress, right? So what is an effective, good communication, right? You have to look at the entire chain of the communication process, right? From the sender to the receiver, right? You have to be clear, concise, coherent. Whatever you're saying has to be correct, complete, right? You have to ask yourself, have I passed all the information that I needed to? And always be courteous, right? Even when you're feeling really aggravated. Which I want to highlight, you have to be persuasive. Communication in the 21st century context has to be persuasive. Now, how do you do these things? And of course, you have to be able to do this over, written communication, oral communication, using multimodal communication tools, because that's what the current world is like now. The two things that I think are most necessary to be able to make anybody do all these things is to have a clear thought process, right? Most people waffle and talk more when their own thought process is not clear. So invest time on getting clarity of thought. When you have clarity of thought in yourself, then you're able to express yourself well, because you have thought through every step, right? Who am I sending this communication to? Who is my audience? What do I want to say? The other thing is brevity, right? To be precise in your word choices. Not to have good, for a lack of good vocabulary, right? And these things take years to build up, right? You need to read more, you need to communicate more. It has to be it's practice, practice, practice all the time, right? It's a learned skill. It's not just about how to write a good email, how to do a good presentation. It is much, much more than that, right? This is what they will teach you in college, how to ace your placement interview, what you need to do. But the baseline for creating, to write a good email, to do a good presentation, to ace your interviews, is to work on it always, right? I tend to say that, good communication is craft, right? You have to plod away at it all the time. That's how you become a better communicator. You have to assess your own rewriting. I never like my own writing. I know when I take it away and then I see it after 2 days, I always find flaws in it, right? So that makes me try to improve, right? So effective communication is something that's never going to go out of fashion. And it only gets better with hard work. There is no shortcut. There's no shortcut by saying, oh, these are the rules of making a good presentation. I will do this and become a better communicator tomorrow. I will ace all presentations. Yes, you will learn some rules, but communication is much, much more than that. And lastly, good communicators are very good listeners. They are not in love with their own voices, right? It's only when you listen mindfully that you're able to communicate well. And that is the one thing that, just don't talk, right? Or try to put your own point of view across. You also have to listen, because when you listen, then you can respond appropriately. And you can take visual, verbal cues, body language, all that comes into as part of being a good listener. We can go to the next one. So, this is what I tell my son, who's probably the same age as most of the attendees today, that your technical skills, the shelf life is going to be very short, right? You will learn some basic skills and you will build on it and learn more and even more and even more all through your life. But the reason why essential cognitive skills are called 21st century skills, the name itself tells you something, that it's going to be around, right? So that is why it will, it is relevant for everybody, either, irrespective of what functional roles that they follow and how the technology landscape evolves over time, right? Which is why it is important to invest in them when you're in college or right out of school right now. The last thing that I want you to focus on, and this is my last slide, and then I will take questions, is, and this is an Harvard article, I will try to put this in the chat box, is how do you overcome your fear of failure, right? because this is the one trait that is common, which is also borne out by the fact that all of you said career and not learning, right? You're in college to learn. You're in this game, in your workforce to learn. If you don't learn constantly, then your career is not going to flourish. So, Susan Peppercorn talks about 4 tactics to overcome your fear of failure, right? One is redefine failure, right? How do you redefine failure? For example, let's take the career example, right? Most people want to secure that first job and then consumed by what that first job is going to be, how much they're going to get paid, will they really get it? But they forget the fact that the job is based on the skills that you're going to acquire. And that is a part of learning. And ultimately, the hiring decision, right, is not dependent on you, but the people who are interviewing you. So all you can focus on is how it's necessary to be able to secure that job. Fear is only going to, whatever fear-driven decisions you take is not going to help you. So, if you think whatever the job that you want to secure, instead of, saying, what do I get to do this? Assess yourself as to what are you really good at, right? What are your strengths? And then what do you need to get better at, right? This is about setting approach goals and dealing with it, right? The more confident you get, right, the better you will be at dealing with your fear. This is what I do and I ask students to do, is to create a fear list. What are you afraid of? Once you have that list in a piece of paper in front of you, it helps you address those fears. And as I said, that when you're studying and even at the workforce, the way the world is right now, please focus on learning, right? Learning as many skills as you possibly can, the greatest gift that you can give yourself. And this is what my father told me when I was about 25, and it's been very useful to me. Nobody else gives it to you. It's the gift of curiosity. The more curious you are, the more you will learn. And it's never dependent on somebody else. It is self-driven. And the more you learn, the more you grow. Thank you. I will take my questions now.
So thank you so much, firstly, ma'am, for such an insightful session. So quickly jumping to the chat, I have seen like 2 to 3 questions. First was, ma'am, for financial literacy, how do I start? The point which you mentioned in your PPT, I think. So that's from that. So for financial literacy, how do they start?
So for financial literacy, my suggestion is that, whether it's Udemy or something, go to online resources and find courses. Actually, at Maker Bhavan, we have 10 free courses that we offer to colleges. Unfortunately, we don't offer it to individuals. One of them is on financial literacy, which we call applied finance, which is not so much in the theory of finance, but things that people need on the everyday life, right? For example, how to read a balance sheet, right? How to create your own profit and loss statement. These are essential skills when you're doing program management, right? Nobody ever taught me. I taught myself, right? But the good thing is that they can be taught, the world being so online, and a lot of resources are available online, right? You can start from there. People are scared of AI. I use ChatGPT all the time, right? I encourage students to use ChatGPT. The problem I've noticed is, chat requires experience, right? How you set the questions. How much do you do borderline? Do you set qualifiers to your questions, right? It's a language AI, but it's very useful, right? You can start from there. Ask chat for a couple of good online resources for financial literacy, and it will tell you.
Great. I must mention that yes, I also use ChatGPT and it's really very helpful.
It's very
So very
helpful, you know.
useful. Yeah.
I have a professional, I use ChatGPT 4 now, not even the free, you know, I use the free version for 6 months. And I was like, this is so useful, I better use the paid version. And the paid version is miles better.
Okay.
So it's worth the $20 per month, I'm telling you.
$20. Okay, thank you for that also. For the plan. Okay. Now then Riddhi is asking, I want to do the fee structure of data analytics course. Okay, so Riddhi, this is the question around career counseling. So we will take this question at the end when we'll have the career counselor. So then he's asking, do you provide this course? I think so. He's around financial literacy only. So as mentioned, you have that online thing. You can, always use it, or you can, if you have any other doubt related financial literacy or the course, we'll connect in the career counseling. Then, ma'am, how can I overfear while speaking formally in front of people? Oh, it's your favorite question, ma'am. I think so. It's around communication.
So, overcoming your fear, right, in public, people use various things, right? When I'm actually an introvert, right? And also very diffident inside. But the trick of, over letting other people not see your fear is to fool yourself, so it can't show here, right? And people use various techniques. One of my close friends who's a PR consultant told me, and I speak on public in audiences quite often. So when I started doing it out, he said, and my son was 4 years old then. He said, look at the audience and imagine all of them in diapers. You will have a smile in your face and nobody's going to know that you're laughing at them. So you find your own ways of dealing with your fear. The best way to deal with your fear is, especially when you're speaking in public, is to practice, right? Even for this session, I had a dry run. Whenever I have a talk, I find somebody and do a dry run so that I know my material well when I'm speaking, right? There is no shortcut to this. The more familiar you become with what you're talking about, the more confident you are, right? You feel like, oh, I know my material, I can do this. And yes, sometimes you still blank out, right? When you're facing especially a large audience, right? But with experience, you learn to sort of fib your way through it, right? The main thing is to not let your fear hold sway over you, right? And that only comes with doing practice sessions, doing it in front of a mirror, then doing it in front of 2-3 people, having a clear thought process so that oh, from here, I will move to here. From this point, I will move to this point. One common thing that I see from people, and you will see an improvement as you do it. Don't set very high expectations of yourself right off the bat. This is a learned skill. The more you do it, the better you will get. So, in the first couple of sessions, if you do terribly, don't be hard on yourself. Everybody starts out from somewhere. And I'm sure if I ask the EduBridge people, they will say the same thing, that when they did their first masterclass, they were terrible. And now look at them, how great they are. So everybody is terrible at the beginning. The more you do it, the more confident you get of your own skills, right? That's what my answer would be.
Yeah, definitely. To add to this, to my personal experience, not from the EduBridge, I was in the college and it was the first speech, and I need to take the chit, and I have that. I still remember the topic. It was around civilization, and I was so blank. I just took the chit. I read the topic and I said thank you. So that's
no, it happens. And then you're cringing inside, right? Oh, I'm so terrible. But the point is, another thing is, Everybody, and this is something, I'm older than all of you, and I will point out, young people are very obsessed with how they appear in front of others, right? Point is, and this is newsflash for all of you, everybody is obsessed about how they appear about in front of others. They are more focused on that than actually how you're appearing. Nobody cares. They're obsessed about themselves. So take that and say that it doesn't matter. They will forget in 5 minutes and just go on. Every time, even if you're terrible in the first time, the next time you're going to be slightly better. The time after that, slightly better. After you've done it 10 times, you can do it in your sleep.